Thanks everybody for coming this morning. I have the honor of introducing Dr. Michael Rowland. He is from the University of Louisville. He teaches through the Department of Education there as well as through the med school. He was invited to come and speak to us today about the 50-plus learner. So talking about adult ed students, he was invited actually through our Adult Education Center at the downtown campus. So welcome me and help me in welcoming Dr. Michael Rowland.
Thank you. Is this on? Can you hear me? Yes. Jefferson Community and Technical College, come on down. I know you're all sitting in the back. You love sitting in the back. Could you move forward just a tad? Even our Baptist people in the back. I heard you. It's just a little more intimate if we can have more of a conversation rather than me kind of lecturing and talking to you. Now, that feels better, doesn't it? It looks better. Good morning. As she said, I'm Michael Rowland. I'm associate professor at the University of Louisville College of Education and in the School of Medicine. And I'm going to talk about our adult learners, our 50-plus learner. As you can see, I have a little bit of personal experience with that. I am 50-plus. I won't say how much plus, but I am 50-plus. And so I'll tell you a little bit about me a little bit later, but how many of you work with adult learners? Good. That's everybody. How many work with learners who are over 50? Just about everybody in here. That's great. How many work with millennials also? Okay. So that's a different story. We'll talk about those on another day. But I'm going to talk to you today about the 50-plus learner. And I know you don't know a lot about me, so I'll fill you in on a little bit about me and my journey to get here today. I don't own the pictures here, except that one in the middle. This is me. I'm from Ohio originally, from Dayton. Any Ohio Buckeyes? I-O. Great. I'm from Dayton, Ohio, grew up in Dayton, born and raised, come from a family of 4 children, 2 parents, lived there most of my life. Then I decided, well, let me go back. My parents did not go to college. They were not fortunate enough to go at that particular time. Different economic time, different time for African Americans, and different in many ways. But they were fortunate enough to go to what they called a trade school. Anybody know what a trade school? My mother went to cosmetology school. My father went to welding school. And then I had an older sister and 2 younger brothers. So there were 4 of us. We all went to college. We all graduated. And I don't say that to brag or boast. I say that to let you know that even students who do not come from families where the parents went to college can succeed. They just need a little bit more. So I went to Wittenberg University. Anybody ever heard of Wittenberg? Great. Wittenberg is halfway between Dayton and Columbus. So I didn't go far to college. It's a private liberal arts college. It is on a campus that looks very much like this campus here, nestled away, very quiet, very peaceful, about 3,000 students. And I always show this picture with the snow, because I was there during the blizzard of '78. Anybody remember that? Yes, good. But this is more what it looks like on a regular basis. It's a nice, beautiful campus. So after I graduated, I went to work for this corporate company for 10 years. They first moved me to Bloomington, Indiana, where I spent 3 years. Then they moved me to Jackson, Michigan, which was a nice experience. Then I decided I'd go back to school, get a master's degree in education. So then I went to The Ohio State University. And we always say "the" as part of the name. That is the name. Whenever I go somewhere and I don't say The Ohio State, people will correct me, so I always say it now. I got a master's there and went to work for Ohio State immediately after that. And I worked in a program that was called our Returning Adult Program. I worked with adults who were either displaced from jobs or coming back to school after being in the workforce. And so I got a real interest in how they learned. How did they choose their education, their experiences? And so I eventually went back, got a doctorate in adult education. So that's my background. And I stayed there for 19 years. And then 6 years ago, I got this incredible job offer at the University of Louisville, School of Medicine. They lured me away. So I came here to Louisville, so I've been here almost 6 years now. That's me in a nutshell, okay? So, but here's what I like to do today, talk about some of the basic characteristics and learning assumptions we make about 50-plus learners. We'll talk about a little bit of the difference between andragogy and pedagogy. How many have heard of andragogy? A few, good. And then we'll talk about the strategies that are best with learners who are 50 plus. They also work for those who are 20. We just tailor them a little bit differently. So, this is 50 plus. 50 doesn't look like what it did when my parents were 50. I think we look pretty good now, don't you? We're a good-looking group. We may not all be famous, and we may not all be rich, or that extremely talented, but 50 is a good point for a lot of our learners. So, what I'd like for you to do for the next couple of minutes is just think about the last time you had to learn something important. The last time you were challenged to learn something. It could have been your iPhone. It could have been a new computer. But just think a little bit about being challenged as a learner. Now I'd like you to talk to the person next to you or closest to you and tell them about that experience. Don't be shy. Go ahead. Okay. I know you're all engaged now, but I'm going to interrupt you. Would somebody like to talk about their learning experience or your partner's learning experience? Who would like to share? Just a couple people. Yes. You're a minister? Oh, okay.
Administrator.
Oh, administrator. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So,
Okay.
so all the administrators, as part of our budget reorganization, are committed to other tasks, teaching a class. And one of the things I'm doing is I'm going to start advising in our advising center.
Great.
25 years ago, I did a lot of that, but 25 years ago, it was a catalog, curriculum guides. It was, today it's completely different. You have to access all kinds of information through PeopleSoft, through the technology.
Oh, yes.
And it's a steep learning curve, not a different, more complex body of knowledge. And I thought it was going to be a snap because I used to do this as part of my job, and it's not.
Oh, it's not.
I
Okay.
my admiration for the advisors at this college.
Did you use any resources? What did you use to help you learn the system?
Well, the head of the advising center put together a tutorial for me and some other folks, and so I literally walked through it. I mean, it's kind of like step by step. It's like hand-holding through the process.
Okay.
But it's just practicing more than anything else.
Practicing.
With imaginary students and, and accessing information. I'm not quite there yet. I've got some ways to go before they're going to turn me loose on this.
Okay. Oh, he's the president. Oh, and you said you were just an administrator.
Same thing.
But, and now you know what it's like to do advising. That's great. That is great. It is a tough job. Somebody else, a learning experience that was maybe a little tough. Yes.
Yeah, I took 2 online classes this summer.
Good.
And they're double speed, so it's kind of like taking 4 classes. And I hadn't taken any classes for credit in 10 or 20 years. So it was kind of a tough experience. There were computer classes, but I teach online. It was online.
Oh, okay.
So I basically used the techniques that I was teaching other students, but it was really, really fun to be in the student position and have to do all the things that I tell people to do.
And all the assignments and everything. And
It's a very
oh, that's
educational
good.
experience.
Good. How many others teach online? Great. Okay. How many have ever failed at something you were trying to learn? So you know what your students experience when they're trying to learn and they tell you, I've studied this, I've gone over it, and I still don't know the material? You know what that's like? I do too. And there are different barriers for people who are over 50 because we bring a lot of experience, we bring a lot of knowledge, and we bring our preconceived ideas about our learning with us. So we're going to move on. So, I believe his name was Doug, or the previous administrator that was here talking about the success program, Bruce. He talked about student success, getting students retention to stay around, and he mentioned that everybody loves data. And of course, we as educators, we always bring data with us. So I'm going to give you a little bit of data. 108 million adults who are over the age of 50 in the United States. That's a lot of people, age 50. But only 51% are still in the workforce. Some are out of work, unemployed. Some are due to retirement. And we all want to reach that golden age where we can retire. But this is the most alarming figure to me. You know what that figure represents? That's the number of adults 50 and over who attend formal higher education, who come back to our schools and our bricks and mortar buildings for learning. Now, that's not to say these 50 and plus adults are not learning. We listen to TED Talks, we learn via computer, we learn via teleconferencing, but only 2% will go into a formal educational arena. And why do you think that is? They don't want to be different. They don't want to stand out in the class. They don't want to be the oldest person in the class. And they think their skills may not be the same. Memory problems, can't see as well, things like that. But 2%, this represents a great opportunity for those of us in higher education because we can increase the number of adults who attend our colleges and universities if we do a great job of offering the courses and topics they want to learn, right? It's a mix. We have to be attuned to their needs and what they are looking for as learners. So, enough data. How would you describe the learners you work with here, your adult learners, 50 plus? Anybody? Words come to mind. Committed. Antsy? In what way?
Just kind of nervous about everything.
Nervous about doing well in the course.
We have a lot to share.
A lot to share, absolutely. They have a wealth of experience. Anyone else?
Some haven't learned so long, there's a hard time getting stuff back. It takes a little while to
Get adjusted to that role. Remember things. To navigate through education, through the system. And a lot of that is because we in higher ed, we're guilty of still tailoring some of our education to the typical student who comes directly from high school. And some of us do not offer services that are convenient for our 50 plus learners, particularly those who are in the workforce and are working days and must attend school either on nights and weekends, online, in a variety of different modes. Some of our learners, 50 plus, may identify with a different age entirely. Women may think they might not have the same skills and ability as a man. They may look at this iPhone and this technology that we use, and we're all guilty because we do make them use technology, right? Some form of technology, and we need to do a better job of teaching them how to do it. But guess who's coming to dinner, though? Our 50 plus learners. And your classes start on Monday, right? How many of you have your syllabus all planned? Everybody has a syllabus? Somebody doesn't have syllabus planned? Okay. You have the assignments you want them to do prepared, right? You know what you want them to learn, right? I'm taking this in the affirmative. And I always think of it, it's like preparing for a great dinner party. I do all this work, get my syllabus ready for the next semester, get my classes ready. I think of it as preparing this beautiful table for people, for my students, for the next semester, for that particular quarter. And I think about what I have on the menu, and I think about what they're going to eat. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I hope they like the food that I prepared. What if they don't like this? Do I have something else to offer them? Or am I going to make them sit through my meal and eat what I've prepared? And this is sort of the way many of our adults feel when they come to our classes. Would you prepare a dinner party and not know who your guests were? Or not know if they were even get along with each other? We would like to think we would prepare. And I think that Kenneth Bain, who wrote a book called What the Best College Teachers Do, said it best. He says, part of being a good teacher, not all, is knowing that you have something new to learn, not so much about teaching techniques, but about these particular students at this particular time. How many of you get to know your students on a personal level? A few. You really get to know them. You get to know what they came to your class to learn. Not what you've prepared, but what do they want out of your course? What do they hope to get out of being in your particular class at this particular time? And I can't stress enough, I think the success of students is knowing the students and getting to know what their goals and aspirations are for your particular course, to help them develop and empower them to move on. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about the difference between pedagogy and andragogy. And pedagogy is, most of us think of pedagogy as our teaching techniques, our strategies, what we use in the classroom. We have a repertoire of teaching techniques. And it is a little bit different if you believe in the philosophy of andragogy. And pedagogy is generally more teacher-centered. It is focused on the teacher and the work of the teacher and what the teacher will do in the classroom. Pedagogy, the word pedagogy, comes from the word in Greek meaning paid, P-A-I-D, which means child, and agogos means leader of child. So it's really teaching of children. And those people who go through K through 12 teaching have learned all these tools about how to get your students engaged. They know how to teach students. They've developed lesson plans. They know about assessment. They know when to move students on. And that's a really different function from andragogy. So pedagogy is more the art and science of teaching children. Andragogy, and there were a few who said they knew what it was. Tell me, somebody. Yes? It relates to adults. And andragogy was made popular in the US by this man, Malcolm Knowles from Harvard. He introduced the term, although it was around in Germany and Europe for many years before him. But andragogy, meaning man, and then leader or teaching of man or woman. And there are some basic assumptions about how you teach adults that he put into place that are different from how you teach children. There are very different philosophical differences between the two. In a pedagogical situation, the teacher is always in charge. The teacher is dominant, and the student is that empty vessel waiting to be filled, right? They don't know anything. So in kindergarten, they learn the basics. They learn to add. Then when you're in the first grade, you might learn to multiply. Well, maybe not first grade. Adding. And then second grade, maybe multiplication. Then third grade, you learn and you build on it. But it's all up to when the teacher decides they're ready to learn that information, right? Andragogy is a little different philosophy because the instructor is not always in charge. He or she is more the facilitator of learning, because adults bring with them a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of experience that K through 12 generally do not have. So your teaching style. How many of you have taken either of these inventories? You have. Well, you're a U of L grad. There are two different teaching inventories, and they talk a little bit about what your predominant or orientation to teaching is like. The first one is called the Teaching Perspective Inventory. They're both free, they're both online. The first one is by Daniel Pratt and his associates. It's a 45 questionnaire. It only takes maybe 15 minutes. The only caveat is you do have to put in your email address so they will send you the results. But they don't solicit anything other than giving you the results. So you never hear from them again. And they collect this data and they give you as much of the data as you want, or they will give you your results. And he believes there are 5 different orientations to teaching. One is the transmission, sort of like what I'm doing now. I'm just transmitting and talking to you. And if you are a person who delivers a lot of content, have to deliver a lot of content, like some of my medical faculty, they have to get a lot of biochemistry out to students. And so they are typically what we call transmitters. Then there are people who are more developmental people, teaching to get students empowered, encouraged. The other one is a nurturer. And that's for people who like to empower our students, our learners. We like to talk to them. We like to help them along. Doesn't mean we baby them, but it means that you do show a lot of empathy and care and concern. The other one is transmitter development. Can't remember the last two. Hold on. Oh, apprenticeship. How can I forget? Apprenticeship. And a lot of the dentists I work with, because I do work with a lot of dentists, Mrs. Cotton's husband is one of my students, and dentists teach in a very apprenticeship style. It's very much like the student watch the faculty member and then they model the behavior. They do what the faculty member do. That's how they learn to do fillings. That's how they learn to carve teeth on plastic models first, and then they move to the real person. And then the other one is social reform. That's for people who want the students to really think about life in general, critical thinkers, getting them maybe to change their perspective about something. And so those are the 5. The second inventory is, how millennial are you? How many think you're pretty millennial? Have characteristics of the millennials? You do? Technology, pretty technologically savvy? Yeah, okay, so you're selfish. That's what they say about Gen X. I'm not saying you are, but okay. Short attention span, love to be visually stimulated. Right, multitaskers, need constant feedback. So the second inventory is a very brief one, 15 questions. You don't even have to put in your email address. It tells you where you are sort of on that spectrum of teaching. Are you geared more towards the millennial students, or are you geared more towards the baby boomer generation, or even the silent generation, those who are older than the baby boomers? Or are you in that Gen X? And it kind of tells you what your orientation and how to make some modifications if you're teaching a lot of millennials, which can be challenging. So, back to Noel's. Noel's assumptions about andragogy and adults are that adults are more self-directed learners. They know what they want to learn. They generally know where to get the information or how to learn it. And they're pretty autonomous. Generally, adults will know what sources or resources they're going to use to engage and to learn material. But they also need to know why we're asking them to learn the material in our course. We can't just give them our syllabus, tell them this is what we want you to learn this semester. These are the assignments. They want to know why it's important. How is it going to affect their lives? Because at this stage, they want things to be applicable to their life at this particular point, right? We don't want to learn a lot of extraneous things that are not going to mean anything to me or your family. You want to learn things that are important to you and why. Adults are not empty vessels. Our 50-plus learners, they come to us with a wealth of experience, a wealth of knowledge. That's why it's so important to get to know them as individuals, as people, because you never know what they're going to bring to the learning situation. Some of you who have older adults in a mixed classroom with millennials and Gen Xers, adults will have a lot to share. And that's a good thing, because maybe you're talking about the 60s or history. You have someone who's there who's lived through the 60s. They have tons of information and background that they can build on, and that's what we need to do, is to build on their prior learning experiences. So the knowledge and the work experience, the wealth of information they already know requires us just to build on that. And I teach, I do faculty development at the med school. Well, it's actually the health sciences, because it's nurses, physicians, dentists, public health. And it's faculty development for all of them. And they know their content, right? We hire in education just for content, right? We don't hire because people have teaching, educational background and experience. We hire because they're very knowledgeable in a subject matter, right? Typically, that's why we do it. But these 50-plus learners in our classroom have other things to share, wealth of information. One of the best classes I had was a couple semesters ago. It was a teaching class, and I asked the students, who are all mostly 50 plus, there were a few Gen Xers in the class, no millennials, because they're a little too young to be faculty yet. But I asked them to teach something for 10 minutes. But I didn't want you to teach anything related to your content area. It couldn't be even close. So all the biochemists in the class who have all this great knowledge, I didn't want to hear it, right? All the physicians, internal medicine, they could have talked to me about dementia or gallbladders for days. I didn't want to hear it. So what I asked them to do, teach for 10 minutes on your hobby. Whatever it is you do when you're not in the classroom, give me a 10-minute lecture on that. I found out the most information about those people in that semester than I had in the entire year. They taught about woodworking, antiquing, wine selection. There was a beer maker in the class, and they gave these step-by-step, great teaching sessions. We made jewelry in that class. We really learned a lot about each other, but they also got a chance to share what they do in their spare time. It was one of the best experiences. So they do bring a lot of wealth of experience. Generally, adults 50 plus are motivated to learn because of some change in life role or task sometimes, because either they may be out of work, they're looking to build their skills, get back into the workforce, learn technology. They may come back to learn about a different area, move from one line of work to another line of work. They may engage in learning to prepare in accounting. They may take an accounting course because they want to get ready for retirement. They want it to be very life-specific and life-oriented. So if you teach whatever your subject is, if you can make it as life-applicable to your learners, the better and more engaged they will be. A few years ago, and we all do this, whenever learners or people experience some sort of crisis or tragedy, we tend to want to find a way to cope with it. And for many of us, it's learning more about whatever that particular thing is. And I had a sister who developed a very serious illness, and we didn't know anything about it. Most doctors, physicians didn't know much about it. This was about 10, 15 years ago. And so I kept going online, trying to find out about it, asking physicians about it. So that's what we do when we're trying to learn. We gather all these other resources and try to find out about a particular thing. That's a learning experience. I did learn a lot about that particular illness and disease. Has anybody heard of transverse myelitis? It's a crippling disease that you get when you are generally in your 40s or 30s, and it slowly paralyzes you from the feet to the neck. And eventually you're not able to breathe. And that's how my sister passed away. But we did learn a lot about it. We started a support group for others who didn't know, who had that problem. And so that's a way of teaching and growing and learning. And so we are really engaged when we can solve a problem. Noel's assumption is we do want to apply our knowledge and skills immediately. It's not future-oriented for us. We don't want to know, like in K through 12, you're going to need this in about 10 years. We don't say that with 50 plus, right? Hopefully we're around 10 years from now. But we want skills and knowledge to be applicable to us now, immediately. We are more motivated as learners internally, whereas children and others are typically motivated externally. They're motivated by rewards. They're motivated by fear of failure. They're motivated by parents who get angry at them if they don't do their homework and pass. But we mostly are motivated by internal self-goals that we want to fulfill for ourselves, right? I feel like I've been talking. I don't generally talk this much in a class. Usually my class is talking too, so, okay, then I'm gonna take a break and ask you some questions. Differences between pedagogy and andragogy. In pedagogy, the K through 12, the children or the learners are generally dependent on the teacher. In andragogy, the learner is much more self-directed, responsible for their own learning. Get them to take ownership of their own learning. We try to do that with children. It doesn't always work. K through 12, they have very little life experience to bring to the learning situation, right? But adults bring a wealth of information and learning. Readiness to learn for children, they're told when they have to learn something, how they have to learn it, when they can move on to the next level. Adults, life change may trigger their readiness to learn and need to know to perform better in life. Orientation to learning, in K through 12, they learn by subject matter, right? And we still teach by subject matter in higher ed, right? We still do that. In med school, we went through curriculum reform this year, and it was difficult. It's been difficult because no longer do we teach biochemistry, do we teach anatomy here, do we teach pharmacology here. It's all integrated. It's a more horizontal approach to learning. So instead of learning these isolated facts and information, students have to be able to put it together, because that's what they're going to have to do when they get to the hospitals. When they get in the clinics, they have to be able to put this information together in a case. And so we made it much more problem-oriented. Guess what? Students came to class. They were prepared. We didn't expect that. But it was really, really tough for the faculty, because we love to teach in isolated blocks. And then faculty would say, well, I'm not going to give my pharmacology lecture for the next 10 weeks. No, you'll give it for 2 weeks, but you're going to be also with the biochemist, and you're going to teach in tandem with the biochemist. It's a very difficult process, but we got through that. Motivation, external for children, internal for adults. I'm going to take a break now and let you talk. Questions? I have more. I could go on. Questions? Have I heard of, we went to the flipped classroom 3 years ago, I think 3 years ago, and we've had great success with it, and we've had great failures with it. It's a good approach for the millennial students. It's really good. My 50-plus students aren't as enamored with it, only because it requires a commitment before class, and these are busy professionals, they're busy adults. Their time is very precious. and it does require a big commitment before and after and during class. But it is, how has it worked? Has it worked?
I don't really teach.
Okay, okay.
But I've read a lot about it, and it sounded more like the andros you've been talking about.
It is great, use a lot of andragogical principles in the flipped classroom. We do. And it is, anybody else use a flipped? You use, and how's it been?
I teach pharmacy calculations course that way. The reason that I chose to do it, let me start with that,
Okay.
was because I was having problems with students being able to do their homework outside of class on their own and being able to get through the material and discussions with them before they try to do the problems. So I set up soft chalk presentations online for them to review before they come to class, kind of as a preview as to what we're talking about. And then when they come to class, they're working on the homework, and we actually do other things, practical applications of
Much more problem-centered.
where they're going to use it in the field working. And I did it this summer, and it was great. I can't wait to see how it's going to go this fall again. So.
Anybody else use flipped? No? Plan to use flipped?
I've dabbled with it, and I sort of am going to flip this year. A couple of my lectures I have got to do in-person lecturing to get them moving forward.
What subject do you teach?
Blood bank.
Blood bank. Okay.
So I'm in the medical laboratory technician program. There's so much problem solving in blood bank, and we really need to work through it in class. And if I don't flip it a little bit so that I have more time to work through those in class, they're going to struggle on their ASCP exam. I know they will. So I'm going to try.
Okay.
Several people I know are going to go with the flow, and I know I've got a few that are just going to say, that's not how you teach. You teach by standing there and talking to me.
That's right. A lot of your students who are used to that dependent type format, they still want you to feed them the information. And the flipped is different.
And you can watch the others shut down as you stand there speaking at them. I mean, they're just like they're done.
That's right. That's right. Yes.
I teach one of my classrooms, part of it, the flip, and at the end of the semester, going throughout, I ask them, how do you like this? And the major complaint that I get is the amount of time that it takes them to do homework. I have PowerPoints set up with voice that they have to watch ahead of time, and then they come into class and we.
Do you use Adobe Presenter or Integrity or some to record the?
No, I mean I just put the sound in the PowerPoint.
Okay.
Put it on Blackboard, and that's very time consuming, by the way.
It is it is labor intensive for the faculty. Now, I will say, if you're using the flipped classroom, it is much more labor intensive for you as the instructor.
Yeah, and then I have problems in class trying to get students to participate because they're used to just wanting to sit and write notes.
Right.
And so, I mean, it depends somewhat on the classroom. One might be better than another, but frequently I get problems with getting people to participate, or there's always one person that wants to
Do all the.
show.
Yes. Yes. Did I see another hand? Yes.
An administrator, and we're getting ready to flip 4 of our classrooms in nursing curriculum.
Oh, okay.
So we've got the round tables, facilitation session, all of the traditional lectures, materials are being posted. And we're fortunate because the classroom is situated in the same area as the simulation center. So when we're talking about specific concepts and things, and that's another thing that we're trying to move to is concept-based versus content.
It's content-based.
We can take them to the simulation area and, we talk about central lines, show them what a central line looks like, we're talking about or whatever.
Right.
I'm going to be documenting kind of our progression as we move through the flip classroom.
Well, good. Good luck with that, because it is very time-consuming, but I think students get more out of it when they can engage with the material on a personal level and they're trying to solve problems. It will take a little bit more particularly with millennial students, they may want to come to class and be much more passive learners and want to sit there and let you lecture and then let them take notes. But in the flipped, you have to engage.
One thing that I think is very interesting, especially, I think comes out in a good classroom, is the intergenerational mentoring.
Yes, absolutely.
So we're hoping to, as we move through it, to, bring out the strengths of, our non-traditional students. I don't even like calling it that because we're all students, but, our different age groups and generations.
Right, good. Anybody use team-based learning? Team-based learning? Problem? Team-based? Wonderful. And how do you use it? Project-based. Okay, very much similar to team-based. Okay. And how does that work for you? Is it working well? Yes. Okay. It does. Yes. Right, and that's what we are trying to do with our learners is get them to apply that. Okay, you have to get them to apply that knowledge really quickly and to learn to do it more immediate rather than later on. And students learn better that way because then they retrieve that information. That's the big thing, when they sit there and lecture and that we're talking to them and we're talking and talking, they don't have to remember that information until they go home and then they try to read through their lecture notes. They want to try and memorize that information. They want to memorize it for the test. And you have to practice retrieving that information in a problem situation. And that's why the flipped classroom, I think, works really well. Team-based learning or problem-based, project-based works really well because it gives them that opportunity to retrieve information more often. And that's the key to learning, I think, is to not only take that information in, understand it, but then being able to retrieve it. And so that's one of the little techniques I always try to use in my class is getting them to retrieve information before class, retrieve the information that we went over the previous class. So I asked them, write down everything you remember and learned from last week's class. They hate it, but it works. And then at the end of the class, I asked them to write down everything you remember about this class. What you learned in this class. What were the muddiest points? What didn't you get? And then they turn that in, and they don't have to put their names on it. And sometimes I get things like, everything was muddy. And then I get times like, this was great, I understood this, but I didn't get this. And those are the times we can go back, reinforce what they didn't get, those concepts, and then move on. One of the most difficult challenges I had with the faculty that I teach, I'll say this, but tell Doug not to mention this, because one of the most difficult things, and these are all higher ed folks, medical professionals, been teaching, some of them 20, 30 years, teaching them how to write learning objectives. You know what I'm talking about? How difficult that was. A painful 3 weeks for me. It was painful. Does anybody know why? Can you imagine why? What do we normally write on our syllabus? How many put learning objectives on your syllabus? Okay, great. Course objectives, they know how to write course objectives, right? We know how to write those because we know what we're going to teach. We know what we want them to get out of the course. Learning objectives a little more difficult. Yes? That's right. It's drilling it down and getting them to write short, simple learning objectives was the most difficult point of my class last semester. It was so difficult.
Can you give an example of something that would be a course objective and a learning objective that would be somewhat?
A course objective might be, in this particular course, you're going to study 18th century literature. A learning objective might be, I want, at the end of this course, you will be able to demonstrate a particular writing style from 18th century literature. It's much more learner-centric than teacher-focused or course-focused. And so that was, and then I had learning, a lot of faculty who had never heard of learning objectives, and that's okay, even though they've been teaching 30 years. This is a new era. They did not go to school to become educators, right? They came physicians, educators. Content was their main area. So learning objectives, Bloom's taxonomy. You're all shaking your head. We all went through Bloom's. They never heard of Bloom's. Many of them never heard of it. Didn't have it because they were scientists. They don't study about how to build learners. And in reality, most of them are, if you really drill down, most of them are what we might refer to as gifted learners. They really didn't, a lot of them never struggled with learning. They don't know what it is to struggle until they get that student who doesn't understand something. And that's why they always come to me and say, I just can't teach these millennials. I can't teach them. And then they're saying they're struggling. And why are they struggling? They don't get it. But then you have to break it down, drill it down, make it much more applicable, problem-oriented, give them the situation differently. But most of them are very talented, bright people, and education was just not the focus for them going through. But now they're in an educational role and must deliver material and how to prepare it for a different type of learner. So that's what I do, sort of. And any other questions, burning questions about your 50-plus learners? About yourself as learners? No? You're a quiet group. I like quiet. Go ahead. Yes.
One of your pictures had a caption, and the caption was, it was a 50-plus learner. I want to know why this is important.
Yes.
But that seems to be a question that I get across demographics.
Even with your millennials?
Yes. They want to know why.
Oh, yes. And millennials typically want to know why it's important. Why do I need this? Because then they want to know, why is it going to be on the test? That's what they want to know. Whereas the 50-plus want to know why it's important, because what relevance does it have in my life? The millennial generally want to know about the test situation. And do I have to remember this for the test? Why is this particular information is important for me to learn for the test?
My wife teaches at Manual.
Oh, okay.
And so relevance is they have to make all their lessons relevant. So again, that question concept of relevance is more of a future application for those students.
Mhm.
But their lessons have to be relevant. The content has to be relevant. So again, we come back to this, why is this important?
Why is it important? And that's a different situation because they're wanting it relevant, but for future application, not for immediate knowledge and understanding.
New applications concern, but also relevance to them, let me say culturally. How does this relate to my mindset? How does this relate to my paradigm?
Okay. Yes. Okay. And that's what we try to do with even our 50 plus. We want the learning to be relevant to their lives, right? And we do want to teach in a manner that is appropriate and use examples that they will be interested in. Use examples that are, if I was giving a talk with my the medical students, I wouldn't use pictures or things that were a generation. I wouldn't show a slide with an older learner on it, but I would use more culturally relevant. And anytime I throw in Beyonce in the classroom, or I give out a term that's more relevant to them, or a selfie or something like that, putting it in their terms, they begin to process it and understand it, making it relevant to their particular life circumstance and situation. You're tailoring the learning to their paradigm.
So what do you do with relevance when your class is mixed?
It is a little more difficult when it is mixed. And I try to use multiple examples, and I try to present information in multiple ways. Sometimes I may use literature or reading. Sometimes I may incorporate music into my class to get a point across. It's just different ways of presenting the material to different types of learners. And that can go to learning styles. If you're a learning style, if you believe in the learning styles and trying to teach to the visual and the auditory and the kinesthetic, it's a blend. I think it's all a blend. But if you use multiple examples, I think that's the best situation. I'm out of time. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Wow.